to Unashamed Unafraid, a show unashamed about sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing, where we share real recovery stories, learn from experts, and share resources that actually work. So join us in being unashamed and unafraid.
Welcome back to Unashamed Unafraid. We have another story episode today. Before we get to that, I just want to put in a little plug. This podcast brings hope to people and it helps them feel less alone. If you know someone who needs a little more hope, needs to feel less alone today, I'd like to invite you to pick your favorite Unashamed Unafraid episode and send it to that person. Let them know why it's your favorite episode and let them know that you care about them and you are invested in their life. We here at Unashamed Unafraid, we want people to feel less alone. So thank you. We're gonna hop into a story right here. I'm with Chris, my co-host, and we have the Jason Coombs.
And see, this is going to be the episode that you're going to want to send to other people because you're going to be like, this hit, Jason Coombs is dope, and we love him, and we're here with him, man. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. I like how you said, we're going to talk about your dope book. And you're like, oh, no pun intended.
Right? Because that'll make sense to you guys here in a minute when we talk about his dope book. He has got a story and he's got a book that he wrote, and he goes into detail about his story in that book, and it is just awesome. The whole book all the way through is amazing. So thank you for sharing that with the world, man. It is awesome.
Oh, thank you. It's a labor of love, emphasis on the labor of producing a book. But it's taken on a little bit of a life of its own. But not to leap ahead or anything.
Yeah.
We can.
Yeah. Well, tell us about who is Jason. Why do we love Jason so much? Who is Jason?
You know, that would be a great question for me to ask you, Chris. And I've really enjoyed our fellowship and our brotherhood. There are a lot of ways to take that question, but for purposes of being a guest on this particular platform, there's a side of me that is the youth in me of growing up ashamed and afraid.
Yeah.
Feeling some of that resurface, and I think that's why it's such an honor. So I grew up in a family, a wonderful family, great teachers of faith and prayer and leadership in our church, and I just have felt very blessed in that regard. And the course took some turns, and I didn't learn until I was later in my life, in my 30s, and even in recovery. I am a person in long-term recovery. I should have started with that. I'm a person in long-term recovery.
I was going to say, well, you're totally going on a different path. Like, who is Jason? Like, introduce it to Jason.
Yeah. Person in long-term recovery, first and foremost. And I'm a father of twins. I am married to a beautiful woman. She most likely won't hear this episode, but she's battling cancer, and so she's at Huntsman at the moment. Yeah, she has been. Talk about real Flanders fire, but I've definitely been through a lot in my life. I currently am a passionate person in long-term recovery, as I mentioned, but the industry that I'm in as well is in the treatment industry. And so my wife and I own a chain of drug and alcohol treatment centers called Brickhouse Recovery. And you can check us out online at brickhouserecovery.com to learn more. But we've got locations throughout Idaho in the furthest corners of Idaho, which doesn't make a lot of sense because it's a lot of travel. But the beauty of this work is powerful. I've learned some profound lessons, and I've tried to pull those together in a manuscript that started once was just a paper for school, and then it has evolved into a best-selling book, and it continues to take it on a life of its own. It's called Unhooked: How to Help an Addicted Loved One Recover, and it's specifically meant for the family members. So I wrote it with my mom in mind. I wrote it with her felt needs in mind. I wrote it with her questions and confusion in mind, and those sleepless nights as she was trying to help her son, navigate addictions and and I say addictions plural because I am a person in long-term recovery from sexual compulsivity as well, pornography addiction. Um, and I would say that was my primary. I used to argue with my therapist when he pointed that out, but I used drugs and alcohol for many years to numb out the shame that I felt from infidelities and struggles in the arena of sexual compulsivity and pornography. So
when did all that start for you, man?
That began really hit the rampant access when the internet was available. I served an LDS mission in Brazil from 1997 to 1999, and those were the years that the internet actually became a thing where it was accessible to people. So did phones. Like I came home, it was like I was living in the dark ages, and I came home from a third world country to internet and cell phones. And that process of surfing the internet was a rabbit hole that was very enticing, and I couldn't get enough. It was very much like dabbling in the beginning, but that started as I was 21 years old. Now back it up to my whole upbringing. I absolutely had a lust and a love or a need for validation addiction all along the way as I was a young man, lusting, wherever I was. But I think I kind of took that on. Well, let's say it's hereditary a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there that we could unpack.
So growing up, did you struggle with anything where you got into pornography or anything like that when you were younger, or really just not even until really after your mission?
Well, I didn't have a ton of access to it.
Right. So
The
just
times that I did,
yeah.
the times that I did, absolutely. But I pushed the limits with girls and with girlfriends, and so that's what I meant. So when I'm to a degree, I didn't turn to pornography necessarily, but I wasn't abstinent by any. Well, okay. You can tell this is a topic that I got my daughter and my wife in mind as I'm, in case they ever are like, well, but I never had sex until I was married, and that was when I was 21. But prior to that, there were some close calls. There was a lot of activity and so forth. So I didn't really turn to porn. I turned to acting out with a girlfriend.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through your feelings on God growing up? Because I'm sure that there's some elements of your relationship with God that play into your need for validation and how you were showing up in your relationships that you just described to us.
Yeah, that's such a question, a deep question, as I think about that void of, I would tell you a little story. When I was in treatment, I discovered this relationship that I had had all along growing up. But at the time, had you had asked me, it would have been probably the Sunday school answers. But what I recognized in my 30s as I was unpacking my beliefs, because whatever I was worshiping wasn't serving my purposes, because I was ultimately worshiping drugs, alcohol, pornography, sex. So as I got clear on this assignment, my therapist asked me to, um, write out all of the things that I would love in an ideal higher power. And that, in step two, that was the step I was on. And I just thought it was the dumbest assignment in the world, because I just didn't feel like it mattered. I had been through the steps a number of times, and step two means came to believe in power greater than ourselves to restore us to sanity. And the assignment was taken. I went and did it. And as I was writing out some of the questions that she asked, it was like, write down what attributes, personality traits, hobbies, like, what does he like to do? What's he like? Isn't he that sort of thing? And that was the first time I kind of like thought about what do I believe,
Yeah.
and what's under there. And so to make a long story short, I came back and I shared it with her, and she was reading it, and it said, like, God skis with me. He loves to ski. He loves to play the guitar. He loves to hang out, go hiking with me, and be in the outdoors and fishing. And she said, is this a power that you can turn your will and your life over to? And I was like, yeah, because this guy's a stud. But I didn't think I could worship this idea for whatever reason. I had this barrier, and I think it was just conditioning of being raised in a certain mindset, or a myopic view, so to speak. And that's not a slam on anyone that was beautifully teaching me about God growing up. It was more about how I received it, and the shame coupled with that, and my behaviors that didn't match up. But when I began to turn my will and my life over to this power, I discovered that the God that I always viewed growing up was an archetype of my mortal dad. My dad, at that time in my life, as I'm 31 years old, in rehab for the fifth time, and had lived homeless and been divorced, and he's squandered so much of his trust. He was disappointed in me. He was angry at me. He didn't want anything to do with me, and I don't blame him.
Yeah.
But when you project that onto God, it's very difficult to have a conversation with him, let alone choose to talk to him every day, and let alone ask him for help if
Yeah.
you feel like it's just going to be dismissed.
Well, it's
And
like,
so that was a big aha moment to break through that and be like, no, okay, that's not
right.
the God I'm gonna worship. My God is loving.
Well, I think a lot of people really put the face of their earthly father onto the face of God, and that's one of the things in the movie. It's kind of like a documentary, but movie. It's like a docu-movie. I don't know how to say it, but where he even says in there, it took me all but 50 years to take the face of my earthly father off the face of God.
Yes.
And where that totally resonates for you, and you're like, yeah, that was totally how it is. If my God or my dad was absent, well, so is God. If my earthly father is punishing and strict and rules are the place, then so is God. And so that totally, I would bet that resonates to a lot of people listening to the podcast right now.
Yeah, and that documentary, I think, is the author of The Shack.
The
Is it
Shack.
not?
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen either one of those shows, Heart of Man or The Shack, you've got to go find those and watch them, because they are awesome. But grab some Kleenex, because it'll get you.
100% agree with that. And I think my dad, my mortal dad, deserves it definitely deserves mention in there were the majority of my life, he modeled a beautiful relationship with God. I mean, he was there. He admits, he actually passed last July. So in his honor, he would admit as he got into recovery that he was emotionally shut down. So using his terms, he was emotionally shut down. He didn't know how to engage or interact. And so
Yeah.
from that standpoint, he wasn't available there, but he was always at my games. And, I love my dad, but what turned into, uh, disappointment, anger, and not wanting anything to do with me, that was very conditional based on how I was living my life. And so I had to sum it all up and to package it up. I had God as a conditional God. He was available conditionally. Like I had to earn it. I had to.
Transactional God, right?
Yep. Very transactional God. Yeah. Very, very well said.
Perfect. Well, walk us through your story, man. I know we don't have like all the time in the world, but I want you to you have such an amazing story of recovery where there's obviously you're deep into sexual addiction, then you're into drug addiction, like alcoholism, all the things, like you name it, you were going. So talk to these guys about, or our listeners, what do they need to know? Like tell us about your story, man.
Well, the again, it's such a big, deep question. And as I think about the audience of what you guys would want to know, as you're listening to somebody that's joining as a guest, and you're taking the time out of your life to immerse into this podcast and this resource, it's like, okay, thinking about what makes the most sense to share, I think it is this beautiful relationship with how I was and what happened to lead me to my knees that that really like brought home this new, refreshed, beautiful view of God for myself and others. And um, the short of it is growing up with ADHD, anxiety disorder, mild depression, as well as APD, which is auditory processing disorder, which created struggles in learning and hearing, things along those lines. It's not a hearing disorder; it's a mental disorder that I was diagnosed in my 30s with. Would have been nice to know when I was young, but the combo of all of those things was a childhood that, although on the outside looked picturesque, on the inside I was feeling a lot of tumult. And so self-medication in terms of adrenaline rushes were my outlet. I would, as mentioned, some of the things we already talked about with pornography, finding it here and there, but ultimately it was, skiing and risky behaviors, stealing my parents' car and then jumping it off big dirt jumps and like washing it before they got home, like that kind of
They won't notice.
risk. No, they won't notice
They won't
until
notice the bumper missing, and
until the car wash people tell them that, your son was in here washing this car last week. It was all muddy, and she was like, "Oh my gosh!" So yeah, I didn't think that one through, but yeah, that was kind of the MO, and then I discovered substances, and so the substances, I have an abnormal reaction to drugs and alcohol and any mood or mind altering substances. It's an allergic reaction. Uh, I love water, but I'm not going to buy a case of water and go hunker down in a motel for the weekend and turn off my phone and isolate, but I will
Right.
with beer, or I will with drugs. And what happens is hard to understand unless you have it, but it's like somebody with, shrimp or peanut butter allergy. They have an abnormal reaction when they're around it or they ingest it. And mine, I break out in handcuffs, but really it was like I break out in this this phenomenon of craving where I just can't stop. So I keep feeding that. And the other piece of that is twofold. There's that allergy piece where I have the abnormal reaction when I do ingest it, but then there's this mental piece to it that is it has baffled people with substance use disorder for the ages, and that is this mental blind spot where you think it's a good idea to try it again, even though you have this long history where you've got this bad reaction.
Right.
Like imagine someone with peanut butter allergies stashing PB&Js in the garage and sneaking out in the middle of the night to go eat those, knowing that they're going to break out and need to go to the hospital. Like that's the insanity piece, but I do that with drugs and alcohol, even though uh, it led me down this bad path. But really, like that allergy wasn't discovered until things got real serious. And so fast forward to I graduated, I went on my mission, I came home, I started dabbling in social drinking and other substances. But where it really got intense was I was working at a local television station in Salt Lake City at the time, and was in a car accident. A coworker introduced me to a pain management clinic, and that pain doctor for 5 months, I saw him, and he was prescribing me 120 Oxycontin a month, and he was
That's just crazy, dude. 120
I know,
Oxycontin a month.
he was ultimately indicted on 83 felony counts for prescribing, and there were a lot of overdoses, and most of those people were, white collar suburban kids that, were young professionals or just partying, like, just taking them for fun. And I got so hooked so fast on opiates that I couldn't turn it around, even when he was indicted and the supply got cut off. It was only a matter of time before I was pawning everything and selling everything I owned so I could feed this habit. And when heroin's $10 for a balloon on the streets, that's the natural course. And so I took that course, and then it became the street drug thing with, meth and crack cocaine. And you can only do that so long before it, totally robs your soul. And so that's where I found
And
myself
sex
running.
addiction through that whole thing, right?
Absolutely.
So, Jason, you
Yep.
mentioned earlier, I didn't actually turn to drugs and alcohol in a big way until I had first dealt with some sexual addiction, and you were, it was almost like a secondary addiction to deal with the pain of what you had done. Can you walk us and the audience through what life looked like leading up to that? Like, what was the pain that you were running from? What had you done, and what were you trying to numb?
Yes. Such a powerful question, because there's a big piece to this story that, for purposes of not triggering the audience, or out of respect for my daughter and my wife, there was an infidelity and the shame that comes from that. There was an infidelity. I should clarify. It was with my first wife, and so we're no longer
Right.
married. And thank goodness I've been 100% faithful in my current marriage, and I plan to. It's
Heck
like
yeah.
I've found recovery, and I love loyalty. But yeah, that I was a very immature um, young kid that made poor decisions and was driven by lust and sexual compulsivity, and so there was an issue there. And when that came to a head, I couldn't face it. I just didn't know how to cope. I really didn't. And keeping that secret, keeping that lie, keeping that shame just grew and grew and grew. And they say you're as sick as your secrets, and I will, from the rooftops say that is 1,000,000% accurate. That my little secrets just added up, and they grew in size and in in breadth and depth and scale and scope to the point where I was completely cut off from the sunlight of the spirit, from being able to make decisions that were inspired. It was very much a survival, animalistic mentality where it was like dog eat dog. It was fast paced career, sales, trying to, get the accolades, trying to get the things, the material stuff. And I was doing well in my career. But that was driven not by ambition that was healthy. It was driven by, I am such a piece of, what, that I have to outrun this. And I wasn't even conscious of it. It was just, I was driven. You know how it talks about in the recovery literature that you're driven. Well, I was driven by hundreds of forms of fear. And I was like, it was driving me. I was the vehicle and it was driving me, like my addiction, my shame, my pain. And so when I was in that car accident and then I ultimately got hooked on opiates, there was still all that undertow that I'm glad you asked, because that is the piece, that is the piece that was the primary struggle, was caused by some of those decisions, some of that addiction and compulsivity. And I think more men struggle with that. Way more men struggle with that than are willing to admit and are willing to seek help. So hopefully, like if they're in secret and in hiding, like listening to this in their car driving home, like wondering if they should, face the dragon. Well, I love the quote. Joseph Campbell said, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek," and that hit home. Like that was the cave of secrets, going in there with a light and shining truth and being real and honest in the process of the 12 steps. And that was in my 5th rehab. And could I talk a little bit about that experience real quick?
Yeah. Because that kind of leads into your actual recovery story, like your sobriety, like the things that changed you, right?
It does lead into that, and it pulls a thread of where this journey like existed prior. Because when I talk about shame and I talk about these things, as I sit on the other side of another person's confession or in their 5th step, and they're sharing their things with me, the case with me was similar. Is there's usually like 1 to 3 things, events or secrets that are like, I'm taking these to the grave. Like I'll get courageous and I'll share the other 8 pages of stuff, but I'm not sharing that, and I'm not sharing that, and I'm not sharing that. Like those are just too. They just reveal too much of a monster that I am. Too much. And nobody would love me. Nobody would accept me, if I shared this with anyone. And I remember the advice that I was given in that setting. It's like, just whatever it is that you're holding back, that you're going to take to your grave, just one time, share it. Just one time, and then never look back, right? Just that once. Just get it out. And I remember, like, I know I'm fast forwarding here, but it relates. I remember going down, I wrote about 6 to 8 pages of things that I wanted to share on my 5th step. Not all of them sexual related, but, some were fears, some were resentments, some were other things I'd done. But as I was, the things that I was ashamed, like totally ashamed of, that I was going to take to my grave, that I'd made that pact with myself, like my ego made that pact with itself. Were those two or three things. And I got to the first one, and it was like, when you get into an ice bath and that loud voice screams at you to get out, like, you can't do this. Well, I've been a slave to that voice all my life. And I got to that first item, and that voice starts screaming at me like, do not reveal this. You are such a worthless piece of, you know what? Nobody will love you if you reveal this. And then there was this like nudge, this comfort, like, and then those words, just one time, just say it one time.
Yeah.
And then never say it again. And you know what? I was courageous enough to say those things, and I've been free ever since. And I don't mean to like jump all the way to, obviously I'm free if I'm on this podcast, but
Right.
when I go back to those shameful things, it's given the listener that courage to just be like, what are those 1, 2, 3 things that you're going to take to your grave? Because those are the things that'll keep you sick. Those
Right.
are the things that I buried through
Yeah.
the other 4 times that I went through, and the other 10 times I went through bishops' offices. I wasn't going to reveal, like, those, no way. Like, I'll talk
Totally.
about everything else, but it wasn't until I actually got so real where I was
Yeah.
released.
Well, so take us through the healing side of it, man. You become, like, I know your story, right? You get to the place where you become homeless. You're losing like everything, and you go to a couple different rehabs. You mentioned like 5 already. You finally get into a rehab that changes you. What changed you in your trajectory, in your recovery, and brought you to where we're at now?
I love that you asked that. So if we're watching a movie, imagine flashing back and there's a subtitle that says 4 years prior. No, let's go to 2 years before. So 2 years before I got into recovery, as a natural result of my sexual compulsivity, my lifestyle. At that time, to give you the context, I had come off the streets. I had lived homeless. Family didn't know where I was. My wife served divorce papers, and just lived down Pioneer Park area, 600 West area in downtown Salt Lake for the winter, and on and off throughout the year before. But once I ended up getting caught by the police, and I had an opportunity to opt into a drug court program instead of going to prison, and it was kind of like, we'll hold these felonies in abeyance if you complete this program. Well, I couldn't stay sober, and so I ended up doing a year incarcerated, and then I would get the opportunity to go to work release, where I had to go work during the day, and then I had to report back and sleep in jail. And so it was like that for a while. And during that season, I ended up getting a gal pregnant who was in drug court with me, and the news was very much a shock to me, and I was in quite a lot of denial. Like, the way that I discovered that she was pregnant was, I came home to this little apartment that my parents were helping me rent in between my jail stint, and I had just been released. So they helped me with this apartment, and I come back one night from treatment, and I see a pregnancy test hanging on my door knob, and it's positive, and I have no idea who left this. Like, I have zero idea. It could have been a number of people.
Well, that's a different way of doing a reveal.
Yeah, that was the reveal. I got first I thought it was a drug test, and I was like, this isn't a drug test at all. maybe it isn't. Uh, I get a text that says, you know, so and so's pregnant, and the baby's yours. So this announcement, this journey of discovering that I was going to be a dad, she made such a great decision, and she was clean throughout the whole pregnancy. I gave a lot of props to my birth son's mother, but he was placed for adoption when he was born. And this vignette, this experience of my story is so transformative and so profound for me. I view it as prior to this experience of my son being born and me holding him for the first time, and then watching him struggle behind the glass with tubes down his nose, breathing on oxygen because he has some lung problems and some struggles like staying alive, and he was just fighting and fighting and fighting for his life, and we weren't sure like how it was going to go. And I just remember like, and I knew that we were placing him for adoption, and so I had like this daily decision, like, do I go visit him or not? Like, I don't want to get attached. I didn't want to love him. I don't, it sounds so bad. It sounds so horrible as I even say that, but
But that was the
I
place
just
that you
was
were in.
afraid. I was afraid of, yeah, like, I don't want to attach and then say goodbye. But that was the place I was in. It was very hardened. But
Why did that
I
change you?
view that everything prior to that was externally motivated, like compliance to get sober, to change. And when he was born, it was this internal desire that I want to change for him. I want
A new
to
drive.
be totally new drive. And it was the gift of volition. It was a gift that I couldn't conjure up myself, as hard as I tried sometimes when I was in jail, trust me. But this was different. This was new, and the Lord knew I needed something that big and that drastic and that profound as this baby boy. And then going through the process of placing him for adoption and making him a promise and writing him a letter and saying, I will change. And you are the reason. You are the reason. And that, although I didn't stick to my promise that I would change, because I still struggled with the how do I stay sober, right? I want to now, but I don't know how. And so I stumbled and slobbered my way through multiple attempts at getting sober, still struggling with all the other forms of addiction for 2 years until I ultimately used so much right after a raid of the dealer's house that I was picking up at. I ended up going into a drug-induced psychosis, and I barricaded myself into this little apartment that I was in. And for 2 weeks, I was in there and losing my mind. I completely, audible, visual hallucinations, total psychosis. And I made a cry for help. I had a moment of clarity. I made a cry for help. I still remember the vision that I had. And in my mind's eye, in this state, it was like everything quieted for a minute. All the voices shut down. All the evil that was around me all the time dissipated, and I could just see this fork in the road. And I saw two paths, and I saw one I was in gray cinder blocks, and I was an old man in a prison cell. And then another path, I saw a green pasture and a horse, and the sun was shining, and someone was combing this horse. And it was just like, that's it. That was a moment where I knew I needed to make a choice. And then I asked for some help. And that led me to my fifth and hopefully final treatment center. I mean, that's the fast version.
Yeah.
getting to recovery.
So what does recovery look like for you now? Like, what are you doing? I know we talked a little bit about the book, but you started at your, you've got how many years of sobriety now?
16 years of sobriety on March 19th.
Heck yeah.
And that's both alcohol, all substances, and pornography.
Sick. Awesome, man. And then so you find this recovery, you start Brick House Recovery, and it's freaking awesome. You're going after the hearts of men in there, men and women, excuse me, just because I know it's not just for men. Your recovery centers are amazing, and tell us more about that and how you got into the book and where you're at now.
Yeah, I'd love to tie up that
And you can take all the
that
time you
little
want over
story.
the next 6 minutes to do that.
I got 6 minutes, all of it, to tie up the story of my birth son. So today he is in my life. He's been my motivator ever since, and my book is dedicated to him. His name is Nathan, and he's graduating high school in June. And it's a very beautiful relationship I have with him and his birth family, or his adoptive family. And the recovery journey post treatment has been this recognition of my pain and my struggles are my credentials to turn around and help others. One of the night staff in my last rehab asked me, Jason, have you ever thought about becoming a counselor? And I remember I'm divorced and 31 years old, and I'm in debt, nowhere to live, and I'm in residential treatment. And I was thinking about his question, and I had never thought about becoming a counselor, but this aha feeling came to me of like, I am an expert in one thing, and that is failure and getting back up and trying again. I can help people with that. And so although I didn't pursue counseling, that was what got me moving and interested. And I started to discover that not only did I have all these credentials with what I had been through that give me a unique opportunity to help others, but that there's all these dormant gifts that are under here that haven't been developed, or there hasn't been any light shine on those. And so as those started to see the light of day, definitely God used those and like put people in my path that would like open a door here or open a door there and help me with my book there, and then close a door there where I thought it should go, and now the book has taken on a whole life of its own, and it's international now. And Brick House Recovery was not on my radar either. Starting a treatment program was not on my radar, but I had profound experience where it was like nudged to take these risks and do these things. So if anything, I look at my life today and I don't see it as this creation of like, wow, look at these cool things that I get to do. It's been more of this willingness to just not, like, I'm a visionary, and so I move in the direction, but I am so used to God when I'm in motion, like taking a left turn with me, saying, now you're gonna, like, I know I took you to California to join the finance industry and you thought you were going to be in this career forever, Jason, but now that you've learned enough finance, I'm actually going to take you to Idaho and you're going to open up a business. And it's going to be a treatment center. Like, it was very like methodical how he's led me along. And so that's how my recovery looks today. It's just this constant process of unfolding and revealing what's next. I'm excited for what's next. I don't know what's next, but God willing, my wife will continue to win the battle, and my kids and I will continue to learn and grow through this refiner's fire and chapter that we're in. And meanwhile, I got an amazing staff that runs my company, and I help where I can. So that's a little bit what it looks like. Started a podcast. Of course, it's helping people with their family members who are trying to learn how to help their addicted loved one. It's called the Get Unhooked podcast. So that's kind of a new fun little project.
That's awesome as well.
Yeah. So that's kind of the gist, Chris. I hope I answered all your questions, brother.
Heck yeah, man. Love it.
So, Jason, do you have a song that kind of encapsulates your recovery and your experience in addiction and recovery?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that one too. If we could pull on the thread from earlier of this, you're as sick as your secrets. The song is by Matthew West called "Truth Be Told," and I gotta
good song.
I gotta thank the Warrior Heart team for introducing me to that song. I hadn't heard it prior to Warrior Heart, and so that absolutely has become one of my go-tos, and I share it with a lot of my clients at Brick House, and it's cool to see them recognize how important honesty is and how important vulnerability is, and how it bonds us and brings us together. And so that's why that song is so important to me.
Heck yeah.
Well, Jason, thanks for meeting with us. I appreciate the honesty and the raw vulnerability, everything that you've been through. I think it's going to help a lot of people. If you're listening and this conversation was helpful to you, I'd invite you to give us 5 stars wherever you get your podcast. Find us on social media at Unashamed Unafraid. Head to our website, become an outsider, and get access to our bonus content. And until next time, continue to live unashamed. Here is, what was the song?
Truth Be Told by
Truth
Matthew
Be
West.
Told.